I never expected my friend's mom to change my entire world. Most days started exactly the same. I stopped at the small coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment before work, ordered the same medium black coffee, sat at the same corner table, and spent 10 minutes pretending I wasn't checking my phone. The place wasn't special. The chairs squeaked, the air conditioner rattled whenever it kicked on, the menu board still advertised a seasonal drink from 6 months ago. But routines have a way of becoming anchors. At 26, I had more acquaintances than friends and more unfinished conversations than completed ones. My phone was full of text messages I'd typed halfway and never sent. Hey man, we should catch up sometime. Delete. Hope you're doing well. Delete. Sometimes loneliness doesn't arrive like a storm. Sometimes it looks like staring at a blinking cursor while your coffee gets cold. That Thursday morning felt no different. I was folding and unfolding a paper napkin into smaller and smaller squares when someone slid into the chair across from me. Dude. I looked up. My friend Ethan grinned and stole one of the unopened sugar packets from the table. You know normal people drink coffee with sugar, right? Normal people don't show up uninvited and steal things. Fair. We talked for a while, mostly about nothing. Work. Bills. The fact that neither of us had figured out what we were doing with our lives. Eventually Ethan checked his watch and stood. I've got to help my mom with something this weekend. I nodded. Sounds exciting. It isn't. He laughed. Actually, can you help? She's waiting on a package delivery and I promised I'd stop by Saturday, but something came up. Sure. Seriously. Yeah. Thanks. At the time, it felt like the smallest favor in the world. I had no idea. Saturday arrived with gray skis and the threat of rain. Ethan texted me his mother's address. A quiet neighborhood, tree-lined streets, the kind of place where people still waved at each other from driveways. I parked outside and checked the house number twice. The package had already been delivered. Apparently to the wrong address. The neighbor across the street had signed for it. Simple problem. Simple solution. At least that's what I thought. I was walking back toward the house carrying the box when the front door opened. And there she was. Ethan's mom. I'd met her before years ago, quick hellos during high school, graduation parties, background appearances in memories that belonged mostly to someone else. But standing there now felt different somehow. Not dramatic. Just noticeable. She looked younger than I remembered. Not young. Just comfortable in herself. She wore jeans, a loose sweater, and had reading glasses resting on top of her head. A few strands of dark hair escaped from a messy ponytail. Nothing extraordinary. Yet I found myself looking twice. You're Noah, right? Her smile arrived a second before her words. I nodded. Yeah. You found it. I got lucky. She laughed softly. That's good because I was about 5 minutes away from knocking on every door in the neighborhood. The joke wasn't especially funny. Still, I laughed. Maybe because she did. Maybe because it had been a while since someone's smile felt directed at me instead of through me. She stepped aside. You want to come in for a minute? Just a minute. That's usually how these things start. I looked at her. She looked back. There was something easy about the moment. The kind that doesn't announce itself while it's happening. Inside, the house smelled faintly like coffee and cinnamon. A stainless steel thermos sat on the kitchen counter with a noticeable dent along one side. She caught me looking. Had that thing forever. Still works. Barely. Sounds expensive to replace. She smiled again. Exactly. For some reason, that answer stayed with me. An hour later, I finally left. Nothing important had happened. We'd talked about weather, neighborhood construction, and Ethan's terrible cooking skills. Ordinary things. Completely ordinary. Yet when I got home, I found myself thinking about details I couldn't explain. The way she tucked loose hair behind her ear while listening. The way silence never felt uncomfortable around her. The way she remembered things people said. That night my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. For a second I almost ignored it. Then I opened the message. Hi Noah, it's Ethan's mom. Thanks again for helping today. Also, I think you accidentally left something behind. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, because I was almost certain I hadn't left anything at all. I stared at the text message for almost a minute before replying. What did I leave? The typing bubble appeared almost immediately. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, you're going to have to come find out. I laughed despite myself. It was the first time in weeks that a message on my phone had made me smile. The next afternoon, I found myself standing on her front porch again. I told myself I was there to retrieve whatever I'd forgotten. The problem was, I still couldn't think of a single thing I had left behind. When she opened the door, she was already smiling. Come in. You never told me what I lost. I know. That's not suspicious at all. She laughed and stepped aside. The dented thermos was sitting on the kitchen counter again. For some reason, seeing it felt strangely familiar. Coffee, she asked. Sure. She poured 2 cups. Not coffee. Tea. I thought you said coffee. I changed my mind. That's chaotic. That's maturity. I'm pretty sure that's the opposite. She pointed toward the table. Sit down before I regret inviting you. The conversation wandered the way comfortable conversations sometimes do. No destination. No agenda. Just time passing. At one point, she disappeared into another room and returned carrying an old paperback book. This. I blinked. My missing item. You left it on the table. I looked closer. It wasn't mine. You know that's not mine. I know. Then why am I here? She took a sip of tea without answering. For a second, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. That was becoming the dangerous part. Eventually, she shrugged. I guess I wanted an excuse to say thank you. Something about her honesty caught me off guard. Not because it was dramatic. Because it wasn't. Most people hide behind jokes. She rarely seemed to. The afternoon stretched longer than either of us intended. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked louder than necessary. At some point, we ended up sitting across from each other in comfortable silence. She was reading something on her phone. I was pretending to scroll through mine. Neither of us seemed eager to leave the moment. Then she surprised me. Can I tell you something? Sure. She folded her hands around her mug. When Ethan moved out, the house got really quiet. I waited. I thought I'd enjoy having my own space. She looked toward the window. Turns out you get used to hearing someone in the next room. Her voice wasn't sad. Just honest. The kind of honesty people usually save for accidental moments. I nodded slowly. I get that. You do. Yeah. I looked down at my tea. My apartment's always quiet. She smiled faintly. But that's different. Maybe. The truth was it wasn't. Loneliness doesn't care how old you are. Or whether you're 26 or 48. It just changes shape. A few minutes later, I caught myself imagining things I shouldn't. Future conversations. Random afternoons. Reasons to come back. The thoughts arrived before I could stop them. And just as quickly came the reminder. She was Ethan's mother. Nearly 22 years older than me. Divorced. Living an entirely different life. The kind of woman who had already lived through chapters I hadn't even reached yet. The realization should have created distance. Instead, it made me aware of how little distance there already was. As evening approached, I finally stood to leave. Thanks for the tea. Anytime. I reached for my jacket. She reached for the thermos. At the exact same moment. Our hands brushed. Just for a second. Nothing happened. At least nothing visible. But neither of us moved right away. Then she smiled. Small. Careful. Almost thoughtful. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After that afternoon, something changed. Not visibly. Nothing dramatic happened. There were no confessions, no impossible moments. Just a series of small things that became harder to ignore. A text every few days. A joke about Ethan's cooking. A picture of the dented thermos after she accidentally dropped it again. Still alive, the message read. I found myself looking forward to those texts more than I should have. That was the first problem. The second problem was that she seemed to look forward to mine too. A few weeks later, I stopped by her house to help move a bookshelf she'd bought online. The job took 15 minutes. I stayed for 2 hours. That should have told me something. The afternoon sunlight stretched across the living room floor while we worked. She handed me books. I stacked them. Simple. Ordinary. Yet every time our hands nearly touched, I noticed. Every time she laughed, I noticed that too. And noticing was becoming exhausting. Because once you start paying attention to someone, it's hard to stop. Especially when you're trying to. You missed a spot. I looked up. What? She pointed toward an empty shelf. Book goes there. Oh. You okay? Yeah. I wasn't. But explaining why felt impossible. So I shrugged. She studied me for a second longer than necessary. Then looked away. Almost like she'd caught herself doing it. The moment passed. Or pretended to. A few days later, Ethan called me. We were talking about basketball when he casually mentioned his mom. She's been in a better mood lately. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? I don't know. He laughed. She's just happier. I stared at the wall across my apartment. A blank section above my television. Nothing there. Still easier to look at than the thoughts running through my head. That's good, I finally said. Yeah. A pause. Then, you've been hanging out with her a lot, huh? The question landed softly. Which somehow made it worse. Sometimes. Dude, she talks about you more than she talks about me. He laughed again. I forced one. The conversation moved on. Mine didn't. That night I almost texted her. Typed something. Deleted it. Typed it again. Deleted it again. Because what exactly was I doing? What did I think was happening? Every answer felt dangerous. The next weekend, she invited me over for dinner. Nothing unusual. At least that's what I told myself. The meal was simple. Pasta. Bread. Too much iced tea. Conversation drifting wherever it wanted. At one point, she stood on a chair trying to replace a light bulb above the kitchen table. Please get down. I'm fine. You're definitely not fine. I'm 48, no, not 80. Gravity doesn't care. She laughed. But she stepped down. I changed the bulb. When I climbed off the chair, she was standing closer than I expected. Close enough that I could see the faint lines around her eyes. Close enough to notice she suddenly wasn't smiling anymore. Not sad. Just quiet. The room felt smaller. The kitchen clock ticked. Neither of us moved. I looked at her. She looked back. And for one impossible second, it felt like all the unfinished conversations between us were standing in that kitchen too. The jokes. The texts. The afternoons neither of us had reasons to explain. She opened her mouth. Then stopped. I did the same. Because if either of us said the wrong thing, if either of us named it, everything would become real. A car door slammed outside. The sound broke the moment. He stepped back first. I looked away first. And somehow that felt important. A minute later, Ethan walked through the front door unexpectedly. Neither of us reacted strangely. At least not enough for anyone else to notice. But while the conversation continued around me, I couldn't stop thinking about the moment before. The moment that almost became something else. And the terrifying part wasn't that it nearly happened. It was that neither of us seemed surprised. After Ethan's surprise visit, things changed. Not because anyone said anything. Because nobody did. The texts became less frequent. Still friendly. Still warm. But measured. Like two people quietly stepping backward at the same time. I told myself it was for the best. Then spent 3 straight evenings staring at my phone. That was the problem with boundaries. You usually discover them after you've already crossed them. 3 weeks passed. Then 4. I saw her only once during that time. A quick wave from across the street. A smile that disappeared too fast. Enough to leave me restless for the rest of the day. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan called. "You busy?" "Not really. My mom needs help carrying some stuff from a storage unit." I closed my eyes. Of course she did. An hour later, we were walking through a small community park a few blocks from the storage facility. The boxes had been unloaded. The work was done. Neither of us seemed ready to go home. The park was nearly empty. Just a few parents watching their kids near the playground. A man walking an old dog. The occasional breeze moving through the trees. Ordinary. The kind of place where important conversations accidentally happen. We sat on a wooden bench near the walking path. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence felt familiar. But different now. Careful. Like both of us knew something was waiting inside it. She folded and unfolded the sleeve of her sweater. A small nervous habit I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to. "You've been avoiding me." The words came out before I could stop them. Immediately I regretted saying them. She looked down. Not angry. Just tired. "I know." A long pause followed. "I wasn't trying to be cruel." "I didn't say you were." "No." She smiled sadly. "You didn't." The breeze shifted. Somewhere behind us, children laughed. The sound felt impossibly distant. I looked at her hands resting in her lap. She looked at the ground. Neither of us seemed capable of looking directly at the problem. Which was probably why it had grown so large. Finally she exhaled. Slowly. "You make things complicated." The honesty landed harder than I expected. I laughed once. Without humor. Pretty sure I didn't do that alone. For a second she almost smiled. Then the smile disappeared. And suddenly she looked every bit as vulnerable as I felt. "I was married for 22 years. Her voice was quiet. "I spent a long time being someone's wife, then someone's ex-wife." She stared toward the empty walking path. "And then Ethan grew up." I waited. The silence stretched. I got used to feeling invisible. The words hung between us. Simple. Devastating. Not because they were dramatic. Because they sounded true. She rubbed her thumb against her palm. "Looking everywhere except at me. Then you showed up." Something tightened in my chest. The wind moved through the trees again. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us needed to. I already understood what she wasn't saying. The dangerous part was that she understood what I wasn't saying too. A couple walked past the bench holding hands. Neither of us acknowledged them. But I felt her notice. I felt myself notice her noticing. And somehow that was worse. "I shouldn't," she started. Then stopped. The unfinished sentence remained between us. Heavy. Waiting. I finally looked at her. Really looked. The uncertainty. The guilt. The fear. All the things she'd been carrying alone. Her eyes met mine. For the first time in weeks, neither of us looked away. "I don't know what you're expecting from me, Noah." The words were barely above a whisper. I opened my mouth. Then closed it. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure anymore. And judging by the look in her eyes, neither was she. The question lingered between us as the afternoon light slowly faded. Neither of us moved. Neither of us answered. And for one impossible moment, it felt like everything depended on what happened next. Everything changed after the bench. Not because something happened. Because nothing did. No answers. No decisions. No brave conversation that untangled everything. Just two people who understood too much and suddenly didn't know where to stand. The next morning I sent her a text. "Hope you got home okay." She replied 6 hours later. "Thanks, hope you're doing well." That was it. No joke. No follow-up question. No opening. I read the message 3 times anyway. Then put my phone down. The days that followed felt strange. Like walking into a room and forgetting why you entered. She stopped texting first. Then stopped texting much at all. I told myself she was busy. Then I told myself it didn't matter. Then I spent an entire evening staring at a conversation that hadn't moved in 2 weeks. The worst part wasn't the silence. It was the uncertainty. At least heartbreak gives you something concrete to hold. This felt different. Like trying to solve a puzzle while someone quietly removed pieces. One afternoon, Ethan invited me over to watch a game. I almost said no, then said yes anyway. His house looked exactly the same. The same porch. The same flower pots. The same dented thermos sitting in the kitchen. Yet everything felt unfamiliar. She was polite when I arrived. Warm even. But careful. The kind of careful that hurts more than coldness. We talked about ordinary things. Weather. Traffic. A new restaurant opening downtown. Not once did we mention the bench. Not once did our eyes stay locked for longer than necessary. It felt rehearsed. Like two actors trying not to forget their lines. At one point, Ethan stepped outside to answer a phone call. The house fell quiet. Just me and her. The situation I'd imagined 100 times. Now that it existed, neither of us knew what to do with it. She stood at the sink rinsing a coffee mug. I sat at the kitchen table. The clock ticked. Water ran. Neither of us spoke. Then she surprised me. Without turning around, she said, "My ex-husband called last week." I looked up. She kept staring into the sink. "He wants to get coffee." The words landed heavily. Not because I thought she'd go. Because I suddenly realized there were entire chapters of her life I could never compete with. 22 years. A marriage. A family. History. The kind of history that doesn't disappear just because something new appears. "Are you going?" I asked. She dried her hands slowly. "I don't know." The answer felt honest. And somehow that made it worse. A few seconds passed. Then Ethan came back inside. The moment ended. Just like that. A week later, I stopped driving past her street. Stopped checking my phone every hour. Stopped inventing reasons to reach out. At least I tried. Some nights I succeeded. Most nights I didn't. One evening I opened our message thread. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I typed, "I miss talking to you." I stared at the words. Deleted them. Typed, "Can we talk?" Deleted that too. Then, "I think I understand why you're pulling away." Delete. 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 The blinking cursor remained. Waiting. So did I. Outside my apartment window, the city moved on without me. Cars passed. Lights flickered on. People went about their lives. Meanwhile, I sat there staring at an empty message box. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. Eventually, I locked my phone and set it face down on the table. The message remained unsent. And somewhere across town, a conversation neither of us knew how to have remained unfinished too. 3 days after I deleted that message, my phone rang. Her name appeared on the screen. For a moment I just stared at it. Then answered. "Hello." A pause. Not awkward. Just careful. "Hi." Her voice sounded tired. "I hope I'm not bothering you." The fact that she thought she might be bothered me more than it should have. "No." Another pause. Then, the thermos finally died. I laughed before I could stop myself. Of all the reasons she could have called. The famous thermos. 20 years of loyal service. That's a respectable run. It deserved better. For the first time in weeks, I heard her laugh. Small. Real. Something loosened inside my chest. Then she surprised me. "Would you like to go for a walk?" The question landed softly. Like something fragile being set on a table. Yeah. An hour later, we found ourselves back at the same park. The same walking path. The same bench. Only this time neither of us sat down. We walked slowly beneath the trees while evening settled around us. People passed. Dogs barked in the distance. The world kept moving. Neither of us seemed ready to. For several minutes we talked about nothing important. Work. Weather. A movie neither of us had finished. Then the conversation ran out. And the real one arrived. She stopped walking first. I stopped too. The silence between us felt familiar now. Not comfortable. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. She looked down at her hands, then back at me. I didn't meet my ex-husband for coffee. I nodded once. Somehow I'd already known. I figured. Did you? Maybe. She laughed softly. Then the smile faded. I almost did. The honesty stung more than I expected. Not because she owed me anything. Because I realized how much I'd been pretending not to care. The wind moved through the trees. She folded her arms. A nervous gesture this time. A while. I kept trying to convince myself that pulling away was the responsible thing. I didn't answer. She wasn't finished. I thought if I gave it enough time, whatever this is would disappear. There it was. Not a confession. Not exactly. But close enough. My heart felt heavier suddenly. Not lighter. Because vulnerability always costs something. And she was finally paying it. I didn't want Ethan caught in the middle. Her voice grew quieter. I didn't want people judging you. Then she looked away. And I didn't want to get hurt again. The last part barely made it out. For a moment neither of us spoke. I watched her staring at the ground. The woman who always seemed composed. Always certain. Now looking terrified. The strange thing was, I felt calmer than I had in weeks. Because uncertainty was finally leaving the room. I took a breath. Slowly. Then made the choice I'd been avoiding. If you had stopped talking to me completely. She looked up. That would have hurt more than whatever happens next. The words hung there. Simple. Unpolished. True. Her eyes softened. Neither of us looked away. For the first time, there was nowhere left to hide. No jokes. No distractions. Just two people standing in the middle of an ordinary park telling the truth. The risky kind. The kind that can change things. Or end them. A long moment passed. Then she stepped closer. Not much. Just enough. Her hand found mine briefly. A quiet touch. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone else would notice. But neither of us pulled away. And after everything we'd spent months avoiding, that felt enormous. She smiled. Small. Nervous. Real. Okay, she said softly. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough. Life didn't transform overnight after that walk. That would have felt dishonest. The next morning still arrived. Bills still needed paying. Work still filled most of the week. The coffee shop still opened at 8:47 a.m. and the same air conditioner still rattled whenever it turned on. The difference was smaller than that. And somehow bigger. A month passed. Then another. We didn't rush anything. Maybe because neither of us had the energy for unnecessary drama anymore. Or maybe because we both understood what it had taken to get here. Trust isn't built in grand moments. It's built in repeated ones. In showing up. Again. And again. And again. Some Saturdays we'd walk through the park. Sometimes we'd sit on the same bench where everything almost fell apart. The strange thing was that we rarely talked about the difficult parts anymore. Not because they didn't matter. Because they already had. The conversations had done their work. Now there was just life. One afternoon, I found myself helping her assemble a bookshelf she'd ordered online. Again. The instructions were terrible. The screws were missing. At one point she accused me of reading the diagram upside down. I wasn't. You definitely were. I was interpreting it creatively. She laughed so hard she had to sit down. Moments like that became my favorite. Not the emotional ones. The ordinary ones. The ones nobody would put in a movie. A random Tuesday phone call. Tea on her porch. A grocery run that somehow took 2 hours. The quiet comfort of knowing someone would answer if you called. Ethan eventually figured things out. Actually, he figured them out long before we admitted anything. One evening, he looked at both of us across the dinner table and shook his head. You two are exhausting. Neither of us asked what he meant. Because we already knew. The years between us never disappeared. Neither did the complications. Some people understood. Some didn't. Life kept being life. But something surprising happened. The things that once felt enormous slowly became background noise. Not because they stopped existing. Because they stopped being the most important thing in the room. One rainy afternoon, almost a year after the package had been delivered to the wrong house, I stopped by with a replacement thermos. She examined it carefully, turned it over in her hands, then frowned. Too perfect. What? It doesn't have any dents. I laughed. Give it time. She looked at me for a second, then smiled. That smile. The one that first made me stay longer than I intended. The one that still felt like home. Later that evening, we sat together on her back porch. She drank tea. I drank black coffee. The sky darkened slowly above us. Neither of us said much. We didn't need to. The silence had changed. Once it had been full of questions. Now it felt full of answers. Not every answer. Just enough. She rested her hand lightly over mine. A small habit she developed without realizing it. The porch light flickered on automatically. Somewhere inside the house, a clock ticked. I thought about the version of myself who sat alone in that coffee shop months ago, deleting unfinished messages. Waiting for life to begin. The truth was, life had already begun. I just hadn't noticed. Beside me, she squeezed my hand once. A simple gesture. Ordinary. Important. The kind of thing you could miss if you weren't paying attention. I looked at her. She looked back. And suddenly I remembered that old thermos. The dented one she refused to throw away. The one that survived years of drops and accidents and ordinary use. Maybe that's what this was. Not perfect. Just lasting. She smiled. I smiled back. And neither of us felt the need to say anything more. Because after everything, we finally understood the same quiet thing. Sometimes the right person doesn't change your world all at once. Sometimes they just sit beside you long enough that it starts feeling like home. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? Share your thoughts and join me for another slow burn journey where the smallest moments leave the deepest marks.
Make sure to like this video, share and follow for more, and subscribe to my channel. Subscribe to my